Lamentation chapter 4 and verse 17. As for us, our eyes have yet failed for our vain help. In our watching, we have watched for a nation that could not save us. Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Hawayala. I want to give all praises and glory to our Heavenly Father Yahweh in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. Please, blessings and mercy be abound to you, brothers and sisters that are called, in the last days to be saints and to inherit the eternal kingdom that is to come upon the return of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. And pretty much today, I just wanted to kind of go into this information just concerning, I seen an article, and it reminded me of a conversation that I really had with an older Jake about, pretty much the lies that we were taught in the churches here in Babylon, basically the groves that are basically set up as part of a spiritual warfare against us. And, the understanding of the Bible was not given to our enemies to help us in any way to save us. And what has happened with our people in captivity is a bit of a Stockholm syndrome and a longing to be accepted and loved and to be in some way, saved, from our condition by the same people that the Most High raised up against us to put us in this condition. Okay. And that's what we've been doing, in these last days. And many of our people are beginning to, wake up out of that slumber and realizing that these people are not who they said they were. They paint themselves as being Christians, but they're not, meaning they're not the true believers of who the world knows as Christ. They do not believe in the gospel at all. They do not believe in the word, of the Lord at all, because they're not the Lord's people at all. I mean, that's quite frankly what it is. Okay. And the more and more, as time is progressing, as, things are ramping up, as we get closer and closer to the end, there's beginning to be a seismic shift of division, between Jacob and Esau. Okay. All right. And this is one of the articles that proves it. Now, this is from the New York Times. This is written back on March 9th. So this is earlier this month, about, a few weeks ago. This is written by Campbell Robertson. It says, a quiet exodus, why black worshipers are leaving white evangelical churches. And this is from the New York Times. Okay, now we're going to see some of the reasons why they're leaving these evangelical churches. Okay, now these are the same churches that they wanted to be a part of. Okay, as you remember, even they will tell you, you've probably heard this if you're someone who's actually, maybe paid attention to either the civil rights movement or basically anything concerning, integration over the last, few decades. You always hear a particular statement that's said that the most segregated time in America is on a Sunday. Okay. So with that statement being so true, which, because of course you had a time when, our people were even under segregation, were still working, under Esau. Okay. And, for example, a lot of our people went to the Midwest, okay, to go work for, these big corporations, and were working side by side in some of these companies, and primarily in factories, all right, with Edomites, okay, and then they would return back home, of course, during the week, and by the time the weekend came, by the time Sunday came, everybody was back with their own people, going to their own churches. The thing about it is that our people were given a doctrine of submission. That is what they were given, a doctrine of loving your enemy. And see, this is the one thing that's weird about our people. They will say that you have to love your enemy, not understanding the context of the Bible according to the law that is talking about your children of your people. But they'll use that love your enemy thing in regards to Esau. At the same time, they will not even outwardly say that Esau is their enemy. So that is part of the the messed up part of the mind of many of our people. When you go and you talk to them about the Bible, when you talk to them about the things that are written, when you talk to them about the judgments that are written and the prophecy concerning the condition of our people, a lot of them prefer to stay in this condition. But because we're in the last days, the Most High has given, shown mercy unto our part of our nation to at least wake them up to the ills and the things that's going on and to the natural state of the people that we're in captivity under. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and go through this one. This is from Fort Worth. Now, you know, being that I'm in Texas, we see this in Dallas and Houston, San Antonio, Austin, all these pretty much major cities you see pretty much in Texas. They have a bunch of, you know, integrated churches, which is something that they started trying to do going back into like maybe the mid to late 90s. It was one of the things that they tried to do because of the fact that what was happening was beginning in the mid to late 90s, you had a lot of Jakes that were moving into the suburbs of some of these different communities, and it was an opportunity for them to start getting some of this middle class, you know, income money that Jake was starting to make to be able to afford to live in these places. And they didn't want to lose these same Jakes to the historically, you know, so-called black churches that were in these same cities. They wanted to retain them. Okay, so they, you know, did the whole Cesare Borgia and, you know, started giving out daisies and saying, "Come here, my son. Hey, my daughter. Oh, we love you. We're so glad to see you here," with them fake smiles, man. We seen that stuff because that's what happened when we were growing up. When we moved from the hood over even to the suburbs, when I was growing up, we saw that type of stuff, man. I'll give you an example. We went to a Baptist church. Okay, there was a big Baptist church that was the main big church in that suburb at the time. Okay, and the brothers that probably maybe know about Houston, that grew up in Houston and know about the different suburbs, they'll probably, you know, recognize, you know, one of these churches. I'm not gonna say the name of it, but it was a big Baptist church in this suburb. Okay, and this is during the time when just a few, you know, so-called black people were just starting to move out in that area, you know, that were starting to move out. Because, you know, a lot of these places, and you see this in any, you know, major city, you got these suburbs that Jake starts to take over slowly or starts to move into and starts to populate little by little. And this is found throughout, you know, Babylon, whether you're in Dallas, you know, it might be, you know, Plano, you start to have Jake moving there, Garland, Mesquite, you know, we start going to, you know, other areas in Houston. You got multiple suburbs that became like that starting in the 90s and then in the 2000s and even more recently, you know, all the way up until I would say like the 2010s or of 2007-ish, really before the whole housing bubble happened. Okay, that was part of the reason why a lot of Jakes were able to move out to some of these places because of the, you know, subprime lending and things like that was going on. Now, as far as with this, you know, you're going to see in this article some of the problems that occur. And this shows you that we're not the same people, okay? Generally, you know, it's not going to be that hard to figure out, okay? Now, this is from Fort Worth. It says Charmaine Pruitt wrote the names of 12 churches on a sheet of paper, tore the paper into 12 strips, and dropped them into a Ziploc bag. It was a Sunday morning and time to pick which church to attend, okay? Now, why would she do that? Because a lot of these Jakes already have a home church they go to. Sometimes they move from a different state and they go to some, you know, I would say a Bible believing potentially, you know, church, as they would say, whether it be usually some kind of a Baptist church or some kind of a, you know, Pentecostal church where they can go and sing and do praise and worship, right? To, in their minds, Cesare Borgia and an Edomite, you know, higher power, okay? So they would come from these different places, sometimes move to these suburbs, and then they would have to choose a new so-called church home, all right? And being that our people are conditioned to love our enemies, we basically give them the benefit of doubt. And that's what this woman is doing. So we're going to see what happened, all right? So it says, this time of the week, 2 years earlier, there would have been no question. Miss Pruitt, 46, would have been getting ready for her regular Saturday afternoon worship service at a former grocery store overhauled into a state-of-the-art 760-seat sanctuary in the darkened hall, where it would have been hard to tell that she was one of the few black people in the room. She would have listened to the soaring anthems of the praise band. She would have watched on 3 giant screens a sermon that over the course of a weekend would reach one of the largest congregations in the country. But Miss Pruitt had not been to that church since the fall of 2016. That was when she concluded that it was not ultimately meant for people like her. She had not been to any church regularly since. It says Miss Pruitt pulled one of the slips out of the Ziploc bag, Mount Olive, Fort Worth. Okay, that was where she would go that day. In the last couple of decades, there has been signs, however modest, that 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning might cease to be the most segregated hour in America. Racial reconciliation was the talk of conferences and the subject of formal resolutions. This is what I said. Now, mind you, I had not read this thing fully, and I didn't even know they were even going to put this caveat in here. I just kind of saw the beginning part. I had this sitting for really the last couple of weeks, and I was able to find the article again. And now it shows you that this is something that was always said. All right. So now it says here that racial conciliation was a talk of conferences. Now, this racial conciliation thing is something that this is a global thing. All right. That was implemented, really by the elites behind the scenes, going back really into the 80s and 90s. Okay. And for example, this type of thing also happened in places like South Africa upon the end of apartheid. Okay. They tried to do these type of things as well. Okay. So this is trying to get everybody globally on the same page to feel comfortable around the people that are the most violent people in the history of mankind, that have done the most wicked atrocities on the planet, to try and get you to believe that somehow that if you are by them, that they're going to treat you well, okay, and that they're going to treat you as a brother and sister in Christ, quote unquote. Okay, now here it is. It says large Christian ministries were dedicated to the aim of integration. Many black Christians decided to join white majority congregations. Now, how come they didn't do the other way? How come these Edomites didn't go from River Oaks to 3rd Ward, okay, to join one of the churches there? How come they wanted you to come from 3rd Ward and go down to River Oaks and go to Joel Osteen's church over at Lakewood? How come it wasn't the other way around? You know the reason why? Because that same thing goes back to the desegregation and busing that was occurring, going back into the desegregation of schools in the 50s and the 60s. Okay, this is something that I even talked to this older gentleman he was from South Carolina. He was in his 60s, and he was telling me about when they were desegregating schools over there and how they had to get bused from where they were at and to go to them Edomite neighborhoods to basically integrate the schools. They was not doing it the other way around. Okay. So this is how they've been doing it. They're putting you in their territory because they're the ones that are in control of the pastor, the associate pastor, the board of directors, all of that stuff, the accountants, everything that's set up there is controlled and handled by them. You will never push the narrative to change exactly what they believe in, which they preach to you is their dominance over you and your submission. That's all modern day Christianity is. It's about Edomite domination and Jake submission, period. Now it says here, some went as missionaries called by God to integrate. Okay, and this is what they were doing. They were selecting different people that were comfortable enough with basically trying to push this integration. And like I said, a lot of this was really due to Jakes that were moving into the suburbs back in the 90s and the early 2000s and things like that. Because I remember those times when you literally had areas where it was just, nothing but Edomites in a certain part of town, and that was it. I mean, you barely even had Asians even in these areas, okay? You barely had people from even other countries from these areas. So as that stuff started happening, throughout different parts of the country, it was an opportunity for them to accelerate that through these particular integration ministries. And I've seen that firsthand at different levels. You know what I'm saying? Even on college campuses, they do the same thing, okay? Now it says here, others were simply drawn to a different worship style, short, conveniently timed services that emphasize a personal connection to God. All right, the fruits could be seen if you look at the right place in the right places, particularly within the kind of non-denominational megachurches that gleam from the roadsides here in the sprawl of Dallas-Fort Worth. In 2012, according to a national report from the National Congregation Study, more than 2/3 of those attending white majority churches were worshiping alongside at least some black congregants, a notable increase since a similar survey in 1998. Okay, and that was the reason why that was happening, because of the fact that they were pushing that. And that's the reason why, because when they had that survey back in 98 was the beginning of integration, was probably going into a few years of that suburban integration that was going on. Okay, you got different places that handle that. Now, for if someone is from Houston, if familiar with Houston, you'll know about a place called Mo City or Missouri City. Okay, back in like 1990, all right, or really you could go back, I would say back in the 1980s, most of it was overwhelmingly, pretty much Edomites. Now it's like 50% or a little bit more than that, when you go there. And I went to school even in those areas growing up, as far as like middle school and stuff, when it was basically had flipped and turned. Okay, so they were utilizing those new worshipers because it always is about the big bucks, man. They know that if they can get you comfortable in there, they're going to basically be able to tell you about tithing, which again, tithing was for the Levites. All right. So any of these other even Israelite camps that are pushing that, they're even going off and they're nothing but robbers and stealers. And yes, we said it and we'll say it again. If you're asking for tithes, all right, from any body, all right, you are a robber. You are a thief. All right. You are an extortionist. That's point blank. All right. Now, it says here, this was more likely to be the case in evangelical churches than in mainline Protestant churches, and more likely in larger ones than smaller ones. Okay, this is that stadium that they're pretty much, building. That's where you have these big buildings. You have these Lakewoods, essentially, where they get, these worship bands with some of the top Grammy artists, where they can pay them, 6-figure salaries. All right, pay pretty much a lot of the other worshipers money to also sing there, just like it was at Lakewood. Lakewood had Israel and the New Breed, who was like the biggest, for some time, they were like the biggest, what you call gospel band for a while. And they were stationed in Houston, getting paid money because Houston, of course, as you know, Houston is pretty much majority as far as the within the city limits, and even outside of many parts is majority the tribes. Okay, so they know exactly what they were doing by bringing those type of things there, and that's one of the ways in which they entice Jake to come to some of these places as well. All right, so it says, then came the 2016 election. Black congregants, as recounted by the people in Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Fort Worth, and elsewhere, have grown uneasy in recent years as they watched their white pastors fail to address police shootings of African Americans. They heard prayers for Paris, for Brussels, for the law enforcement. They heard that one should keep one's eyes on the kingdom, that the church was colorblind, and that talk of racial injustice was divisive, not a matter of the gospel. There was still some hope that this stemmed from an obliviousness rather than a deep disconnect. No, this is because Esau lacks empathy. He's a cruel being. So he cannot empathize with you. Okay, that's really what it is. It's not because they don't understand, or we don't know why you care about this. You're going to go to the church and talking about what happened to Mike Brown, what happened to Sandra Bland. You tell me when the Sandra Bland thing happened, and people and all them jakes that was going to Lakewood. Do you think that Joel Osteen addressed that? Hell no. Because Joel Osteen got some rich Edomites that also go to the church that live right around the corner that have, $1 million, even some of them ain't even working, got tens of millions of dollars, all right, in their retirements account. So you think that he's going to address something like that? Nah. You think that when you go and when you're distressed about the oppression of our people, that they're going to talk about it? Nope. They're going to tell you that God's going to handle it, and all this stuff. That's what they're gonna tell. And when they say God, they mean their God. They don't mean Yahweh. They don't mean the Most High that's actually the avenger, right, of the injustices that occurs to his people. That's not who they're talking about. All right, this is the reason why these Edomites think like this, man. I'm gonna go ahead and get this real quick. This is Psalm 73:5. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. All right, they're not plagued like us because they're the oppressors. They're not going to feel the brunt of the pain. They're not going to feel it at all. Okay, they are a selfish people, and this is just what it is. All right, Edomites are just a people that have no heart. They have no way of addressing these things, even when they call themselves Christians, which that would mean, if you think about it, if an Edomite who profess themselves to be a Christian and a worshiper of God cannot address the oppression of a subset of their own fellow brothers and sisters in quote unquote Christ, then what does that tell you about anybody else among them, all right, that is related to them or is friends with them that doesn't profess themselves to be Christians? Okay. Verse 6, therefore, pride compasseth them about as a chain. Violence covereth them as a garment. And this is how you know that they are violent people. Okay. They can't even take it off, man. It covers them like a garment. Here it is, a violent acts of oppression is occurring against you. Yesterday, they just came out that in Baton Rouge that they're not going to charge the cops that in plain sight murdered Alton Sterling, who was unarmed, who had both of his arms pinned with two 200+ pound Edomites on top of him, and shot him 6 times in point blank range in the chest and killed him in front of people, man, on camera. But you go and talk to Edomite, even an Edomite at your church, you talk to them, they're not going to say nothing. In fact, they're going to be raising up money to put funds and money for them Edomites that was put on leave. They're going to raise up $1 million for them. They're going to go and let them move from Baton Rouge to another parish, or move them to Texas, or move them to Mississippi or Arkansas, or move them somewhere in the Midwest or whatever, and give them a job as a policeman over there, while he takes the hundreds of thousands of dollars he got that they raised for him. But then they're going to sit here and tell that they are the ones that's telling you that you need to believe in who they believe as Jesus, that you need to believe and trust in him. This is the same people that's telling you this. And this is the reason why you know that our people are in a state of sickness, when they can see this type of stuff and they still don't want to question these people, neither the things that they're teaching them. That's why when you see things like Shield Squad, people like that step over to these so-called Christian apologists like your James White and Vocab Malone, and they're trying to basically subvert and come against, the thing that we need the most, which is to hear the gospel and to believe in it, because we need the comfort of the scriptures. We need the comfort of the words of Yahawashi in order to get through this captivity. And they want to take that away from us, man. They want to just even take that away from us. How much more are us being able to receive, everlasting salvation? This is how deeply they hate us. Okay. Verse 7, their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than heart can wish. They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. Okay, that's Esau. That's exactly how Esau thinks, right? And even people that have the same mentality, whether they be the wicked of our people or whether they be the heathen. Okay, but the case in point is that type of mentality is exhibited heavily with them. Okay, and there's no getting around it. This is how they are. They sit there and wonder, how can I empathize with these people? You ever seen an Edomite that struggles with it? It's like them trying to solve a crazy long, differential equations in calculus 2 or something. That's how hard it is for them to actually get themselves in a mode, in a state of mind to even empathize with our oppression, man. They can't do it, man. That's why it says here, I'm going to read that last sentence again. There was still some hope that this stemmed from an obliviousness rather than some deeper disconnect. Okay? Guess what? There was a disconnect. The disconnect was in the womb, man. The separation that was already in the womb, man. That's how the Most High set it up. That there was going to be a major disconnect. Two separate nations that are completely different from one another. Okay? Continuing on. Then white evangelicals voted for Mr. Trump by a larger margin than they had voted for any presidential candidate. They cheered the outcomes, reassuring uneasy fellow worshippers with talk of abortion and religious liberty about how politics is the art of compromise rather than the ideal. Christians of color, even those who shared these policy preferences, looked at Mr. Trump's comments about Mexican immigrants, his open hostility to NFL players protesting police brutality, and his earlier birther crusade against President Obama, claiming falsely he was not a United States citizen. In this political deal, many concluded they were the compromise. Okay, so this is what these jakes are going to these same churches, and this is Texas now. Okay, all right, this is not, we're not dealing with them fake liberals out in the West Coast where they just fake as hell. You know, where, of course, when the statistics came out, the majority of Edomite women, you know, or so-called white women, as we, you know, we'll put it and package it that way, because we know that everybody that's not classified, we say it again and again, not everybody that's classified, all right, as white is an Edomite, but the vast majority overwhelmingly are, okay? But for the sake of this, we're going to just go into the fact that the majority, all right, of so-called white women voted for Trump, even though he had many quote-unquote misogynistic remarks against women. So we're talking about a whole different level of deception that's going on here in order to make you feel comfortable enough to go to a place where a group of people openly support a guy who's openly racist. Okay, not fake racist like you know, like your Democratic candidates, all right, that conceal it for the sake of keeping our people asleep. This is why nobody who's a believer should ever participate in any kind of politics. So it says here, it said to me that something is profoundly wrong at the heart of the white church, said Shaniqua Walker Barnes, a professor of practical theology at the McAfee School of Theology at Mercer University in Atlanta. So she says here, it said to me that something is profoundly wrong at the heart of the white church. What is wrong? All right, they were born that way. Okay, the Most High has already prophesied, and it's already been prophesied to us, you know, through his prophets, the condition and the state of being of Esau. Okay, that's why it tells you, you know, what is the thing? We've read it before about the perpetual hatred. It says in the Bible that Esau has a perpetual hatred for his brother Jacob. Hatred comes from within. It comes from the heart. That is their very core of who they are, their essence. So it has to also show the same in anything else they do, especially if in something that they spiritually set up. It's got to not take into account what the sufferings and things that they bring upon our people. Okay? Now, I can read it again another way. It said, it is said to me that something is profoundly wrong at the heart of the Edomite church. Okay? Early last year, Professor Walker Barnes left the white majority church where she had been on staff. Like an untold number of black Christians around the country, many of whom had left behind black majority churches, she is not sure where she belongs anymore. We were willing to give up our preferred worship style for the chance to really try to live this vision of beloved community with a diverse group of people. She said that didn't work. Yeah, because ideally, when you look at the gospel in and of itself, it is a barrier breaker. It does break down barriers, so-called ethnic or even racial barriers for those that believe, because the racial categories of today are simply bywords and new titles put upon biblical nations, and then there's confusion even within that based on how it was created, because it has no origin even going back to the Table of Nations. Okay, so and I'll definitely discuss that in another subject about this particular aspect of the diversity among believers in the body of Yahawashi, and how the Most High purposely set it up like that. So yes, in one way, Jake understands maybe that there is supposed to be something there. But when you have something that's base and foundation is not found upon Yahawashi, this is found upon Edomite supremacy. Their whole church system of belief is built upon Edomite supremacy and, again, Jake submission. That is the foundation of the Edomite church system. Okay? It says, it has been a scattered exodus, a few here, a few there, and mostly quiet, more in fatigue and heartbreak than outrage. Plenty of multiracial churches continue to thrive, and at some churches, tough conversations on race have begun. The issue has long shadowed the evangelical movement. The Reverend Billy Graham, who I did a lesson on, who's nothing but a demon, he's also a Mason, okay, who died last month at 99, bravely integrated the audience at his crusades and preached alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but kept silent at key moments, okay, which he was basically set up to, be a mouthpiece to kind of play both sides, okay, which is what a lot of them did. Especially a guy like Billy Graham, he was built to basically, play both sides and to help Martin Luther King with his goals that he had of, I guess desegregation, whatever you want to call it, which led to, really the basest state of our people probably in Babylon at this particular point in time. Okay, which, that's a whole nother story about how that happened. But continuing on. But for many black churchgoers, the current breach feels particularly painful. Lecrae, which Lecrae is actually from Texas. I want to say he is from Dallas, but spent a lot of time in Houston, because I actually have seen him even perform back before he blew up, majorly. This is back in the day. Okay, everybody, even people, back in the day, he was a Christian rapper, but even people that wasn't even into Christian rap knew about him. Okay, because he was, a known guy, and he was around, a lot of areas where Jake is. So a lot of people know the guy, and he's a big time. Of course, he's probably the number one, Christian rapper. I think even his album went platinum or whatever. But he's actually said some things as well. All right, well, which hopefully a lot of these guys, Lecrae, and other guys that, if you guys know about so-called, gospel rap, cross movement, a lot of these guys have been told about the whole Israelite thing. A lot of these guys have been bombarded with that continuously, whether it was in person, whether it was on their Instagram or their Twitter. They've been hit with that many times. Okay, and now Kendrick Lamar basically done beat them to the punch. But anyway, it says here that he has spoken openly of his divorce with white evangelicalism. Christian counselors have talked frankly of the psychological toll of trying to hang on in multiracial churches, and others have declared it's time to consider the serious downsides of worship integration. Because, you see, this is the thing, even in the carnal level, when Jake is trying to get together with Esau, it doesn't work, man. It's kind of fit a square peg into a round hole, man. It's not going to connect. There's a disconnect. You can try and force it as much as you can. It ain't going to work. Okay? And Lecrae, like I said, Lecrae back in that time when he was kind of blowing up and getting a name for himself, Lecrae would perform at, these Christian revivals where a lot of Edomites were, which what would happen is a lot of these, Edomites would become born again Christians, and then they would try and give them other musical alternatives. They would try and give them musical alternatives that were basically, feed what the musical cravings that they were already getting from other artists that were more mainstream, I guess you can say, and a lot of these artists, whether they would be rock, country, or rap, they were on par, talent-wise, a lot of times with the mainstream, in terms of what they were able to produce and replicate. So these guys were very critical. Guys like Lecrae were very critical in helping in the integration of some of these places, some of these different church groups that would try and integrate Jake into it. So Lecrae very much understands exactly what he's talking about dealing with this stuff at that level, because he's seen it. All right. So everything we tried is not working, said Michael Emerson, the author of Divided by Faith, a seminal work on race relations within evangelical church. The election itself was the single most harmful event to the whole movement of reconciliation in the past 30 years. He said it's about to completely break apart. And I believe that, because one of the things that happened with the election is that Trump made it openly possible for Edomites to express their hatred for Jake. I mean, going back even to Obama election, there was already 8 years of uneasiness among Edomites. So all that frustration and stuff that they dealt with over those 8 years of seeing someone that didn't look like them ruling was basically being able to take that energy and now bottle it up in the words of Trump, who basically is just playing them himself. He's playing them by saying a lot of those things because he understands what time it is. Okay? And he's very much aware of what he's set up to do. And he played them, and he basically made them get out in the open and be outright openly bigoted. Okay? And they would put their stuff on their Facebook, and they would have Jake's following them, and Jake would see some of the stuff that they would say and some of the memes they would put up. And then they would be like, man, I can't believe so-and-so said this. I thought he was cool. Or I thought she was cool. This, that, and other. And then this is basically just completely led to, things falling apart for this whole integration thing, because the whole thing is that there is supposed to be division. Division is actually a setup even by the government. Okay, so they'll allow certain things to integrate, and then they'll break it apart to allow things to kind of get hot when need be, which is we're in the time of that. So it says, this is what I need. Ms. Pruitt had been church-going Christian since the mid-1990s, for first joining a mostly black megachurch in Dallas, where she was on the dance team. Inspiration began to flag after some years there, and one night she was drawn to a pastor whom she saw on TV. He was, she later learned, Robert Morris of Gateway Church. Okay, so this is Robert Morris of Gateway Church out there in Dallas, and as you can see, you can even see from behind what the majority of the congregation looks like. Okay, you see here, you see it says here Gateway's congregation is mostly white. Okay, all right, and you still got some people that are still trying to go there and trying to hope the best. But again, man, a lot of these mega pastors, and then especially down south, they're going to be ardent Trump supporters, because that's what the people want. Okay, and South Lake, Texas, man, is like an uppity, Edomite enclave. Okay, all right. So now going on, there's a lot of information, man, when you go through here, but basically as you go through, I'm gonna kind of skip down a little bit. Let me see if we can find. Let me see here, because it's going to go into the whole, the police brutality thing. Oh, okay. Well, let me read this real quick, because we're definitely gonna get into this. I was thinking about this earlier today. We're gonna definitely look into this this particular thing that they're quoting. But I'm gonna read this for a second. It says the congregation is mostly white, but not entirely. The pastor at 2 of the 6 satellite campuses are black men. Church videos and promotional materials are intentionally filled with people of color. The goal, says Pastor Morris, who is white and has a black son-in-law, is to have a church that looks like heaven, as described in the book of Revelation, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, which we'll get into that, okay? We'll get into the meaning of all this, okay? Because, this is something that we definitely always have to go into when it comes to the gospel. to really dispel what it really truly means, okay? And we're going to basically, show you what true diversity in the gospel really means, okay? And who it's representing, all right? Where is this diverse group of people coming from, and where is their origin, and how did they become this, and then and how is it set up in the gospel for them to be this diverse as far as nation, tribe, people, okay, and language. So now this particular pastor has a black son-in-law. So one of his daughters married a so-called black man. Now let me tell you something. This is what a lot of people don't know. They do this on purpose. I'm gonna go into two different things. One, Dallas people that are not from Texas, or they're not from here. They have to understand that different cities are different, even in Texas. Dallas in the South and in the state of Texas has always had a relatively high so-called interracial marriage and dating rate. Okay, really since the 90s. Even before, Houston, I would say. And this is me saying this with having relatives and people in Dallas, and having gone back and forth to Dallas since I was young, and Houston and, other cities as well. All right. So it's not common for even a so-called conservative Republican to possibly have a daughter that might be married to a Jake. Okay. Now, I've seen this happen before at another church in Austin, where a guy was one of the main pastors. I won't say he was a junior pastor, but he was actually the main pastor, one of the main pastors at a decent-sized church in Austin. And he had a daughter that was very, very popular, influential she was young, she was like college age. And her parents set her up with a Jake that was very successful. Okay, and I think that, and from what I remember, I believe it was done on purpose, because they wanted to have that type of look, or that kind of look before the congregation. And even further, I'll even say this: that doesn't mean that they still don't hate Jake. And that's one to see, and that right there in of itself is one of the hardest things. That right there, that setup is one of the hardest things for Jake to even understand. Okay? Why they would allow that and still hate Jake. That stuff is hard for them to understand. Okay? Because see, what you got to understand is, when you go into the Bible, when you go into during the time of the Judges, you even see that I believe it's the Ammonites or the Moabites set their daughters to go in and entice the men of Israel, the young men of Israel. So they were even willing to even give their daughters even over to them in order to help to take them down in the long. Ultimately, that is actually an old strategy of control. Okay. So that you would hate people so much that you would actually, you send your daughters over there as basically infiltrators and to booby trap them, knowing that they're going to basically follow their ways. All right, because they're heathen women, and because of really the way in which they got them, not in the means of war, which we'll probably go into another time. But that's besides the point. Now, this right here this is what they use, and this is what is used all the time, okay, in evangelical Christianity. They love using this, all right, because I give you a prime example. I knew a group in Austin that was called Every Nation Ministry. And Every Nation Ministry was a big church. It had satellite campuses all throughout the country, all throughout the world. I mean, it might be one of the largest, collection of churches that I've ever heard of, at least at the time. And they were called themselves Every Nation Ministries, and they based their Every Nation Ministries based on this particular, scripture and revelation. Okay. Now it says here, the general whiteness of the congregation is not something that every black worshiper dwells on anyway. To grow up black, said Carla McKissy Smith, who started going to Gateway in 2009, is to get used to being in the minority. As the headlines of the outside world turn to police shootings and protests, little changed inside majority white churches. Black congregants said that beyond the occasional vague prayer for healing a divided country or a donation drive for law enforcement, they heard nothing. Of course. Tamise Neme Spencer, who used to attend a mostly white church in Kansas City, said her fellow congregants did not seem to even know the name Trayvon Martin, the black teenager killed in Florida at the hands of George Zimmerman in 2012. Now, how would they not know? See, they try and play dumb because Trayvon Martin's name was plastered throughout the internet. It was on CNN. If they don't watch CNN, it was on MSNBC. If they don't watch that, they more than likely was watching Fox News. So they knew about him. Okay? They were just playing stupid. And when Miss Spencer brought up his death, she said white church members asked why she was being divisive. And that's how Esau is. You say that you're being under attack, as a people, they tell you it's division that you're bringing up this stuff. That tells you, if even on an individual level, you can imagine if a mass massacre happens against Jake, how they would even react. That just shows you what kind of people you're dealing with. Because see, in the gospel, believers in the gospel have a heart towards those that are oppressed. Okay? When you go and you read things like Psalms, you read Proverbs, you read, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, you read these things. You read even the different books of the prophets. You just think about the Sermon on the Mount from Yahawashi. It talks about dealing with an oppressed, beaten down, downtrodden people. It's clear. So this is very obvious that this message is not for them. All right? And that's the reason why our people have to have a true understanding of the gospel of Yahawashi and the way in which we are to follow and worship him in order to be delivered and saved from the hands of our enemies and from the hands of those that hate us, in order to serve him without fear, right, in his kingdom. Now it says here at Gateway, black worshipers who secretly asked, in fact, let me actually go here. It says, it's not even on your radar and I can't sleep over it, she remembered thinking. And now that I'm being vocal, you think I've changed? At Gateway, black worshipers who would discreetly ask one another if they were the only ones who noticed that one could talk about seemingly anything but racism, a feeling one former congregant described as an out-of-body experience. My goodness, man. Jeremiah White, who was black, who was so excited about Gateway when a friend brought him there years earlier that he insisted his parents come. Now, mind you, bro, this is in South Lake, man. South Lake is uppity Edomite town, bro. Okay? So Jake wants this feeling, man. Jake wants to be amongst these Edomites and wants to be loved. Really, Jake doesn't just want to be loved. Jake is just willing to he just wants to know that Esau hates him a little less than yesterday. That's all. Okay? And this is the sad thing about our people. Okay? In fact, let me get this scripture real quick. This is Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 33. Why trimmest thou thy way to seek love? Therefore thou hast also taught the wicked ones thy ways. They trim their ways to seek love, man. Our people do that. We will turn a blind eye to the fact that you are going into the territory of your oppressors, and you would think that by you going there and smiling with them and tell them God bless you, that they're going to somehow change and they're going to hate you less. Now, a teenager with his parents volunteering at the church for 12-hour days on weekends, Jeremiah has also begun to notice the little details. An associate pastor trying to get the attention of a black man jokingly referred to him as the one God left in the oven a little long. All right. Now think about this. This is interesting, right? Because it tells you that Yahawashi's feet were of fine brass, as if they were burned, right, in a furnace. So, come on. Now, this right here, this guy actually might have been jokingly trying to throw shade on him, letting him know that he knows who his power really is. It says a youth leader suggesting Jeremiah must be new because he was black. He had been there for years, but they still ain't even recognized him, man. You just overlooked. Now look at this, man. It says here, Jeremiah White made a cartoon and sent it to the church leaders the summer of 2016. Reading, he's getting harder to ignore. Racism. Gateway Church. Wow. It says in this, that's crazy. That boy there, hey, man. They ain't trying to have that, dude. They ain't trying to have that. Now, for the sake of this, man, I'm going to cut it a little bit short, man. But you can read the rest of it. You pretty much guess what is going on. I have the link of this article in the description. Is a pretty long read, but you pretty much get the idea of what's going on and how Esau just doesn't give a damn, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 13. Wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near with me with their mouth and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. That's pretty much, I mean, we are learning, right, really from the lowest man on the planet. Not only that, this is our direct conqueror, you know. This is the one who gave us all these bywords, who sets up all these different systems and different laws and traps to try and destroy our people every single day, every single waking minute, second, hour that they have. They are trying to bring us down lower and lower as a people. And we're learning from these people, and our people are trying to teach their own people how to, you know, worship the Lord, and it's not working. And see, and that's why that first lady, man, she's now searching, going from place to place, looking for comfort, man, because she knows she needs the comfort. These are comforting words when you hear about the gospel, when you know that the Most High is a vengeful power, and you can seek comfort in that because you're not hurt because you have the understanding. Wisdom and knowledge is the stability of the times and the strength of thy salvation. You are able to suffer patiently because you understand the end game. What is she going to do what is she going to do if there's an all-out massacre and something happens and nothing is done about it? It already happened over there in South Carolina. One bigger can be done, and Esau still won't give a damn. They'll be sitting there copping pleas for whoever did it. That's how they do, man. It's Proverbs chapter 3, and go down to verse 31. Envy not the oppressor and choose none of his ways. Right? So that includes, you know, anything that he built up, especially spiritually, man. Let them stay in their own churches and cheer on, you know, whoever they feel is in power, and speak what they want to speak. The gathering of the people is going to be under Yahawashi. Everybody else is going to be scattered abroad, meaning they're going to be basically in different places, you know, looking for truth and not being able to find it. So this is, you know, part of, you know, what's going on. You know, our people are slowly waking up. The dry bones are shaking, right? And they're forming more and more. And more people are waking up to the fact that this man is a demon. You know, more and more I'm seeing people just outright just saying Esau's a demon. You know, this guy's a demon. I mean, I've seen that everywhere. Even people that don't even know, they're not even into the Israel thing. They really starting to realize, like, day by day, they're like, yo, these people are demons. They see in the comments. You go on Instagram, you see the comments that they're saying about Alton Sterling, you know, over the last 24 hours. Copping pleas for the cops. You see what they're saying about Stephon Clark over there in Sacramento. Copping pleas. You know, a lot of people copping pleas for these cops doing these things. You know, so why are they doing that? Because again, they're Edomites. The heart that is lifted up in them is not upright in him, man. It's not upright. So he's basically showing himself to be a complete adversary of our people and an oppressor. So hopefully this is edifying. And again, you know, I want to give all praises and glory to our Heavenly Father Yahweh, in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi, for giving us this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding in these last days, that we may be able to have peace and be comforted by the words of these scriptures, and that we may be able to hopefully attain everlasting life. So again, Shalom.